It's interesting, isn't it? All that, hate speech is, facts don't care about your feelings, safe space. And now hate speech just means...
It was all projection.
Of course.
I'm sitting in the US and I'm trying to tell Americans, this is really bad because the UK traditionally was insulated from the kind of far-right politics that you've seen on the continent.
I have huge amounts of respect for people who happen to be Christian, Muslim, Jewish, whatever. But God is King is a catchphrase being used by this far-right religious movement in the United States, and they were yelling it here. It's got nothing to do with British culture. That phrase has just been imported, and it's associated with the likes of Charlie Kirk and that.
Is Keir Starmer helping Farage simply by his existence?
He's the midwife of a Farage government.
The Greens have just elected a very lefty, charismatic leader, Zach Polanski. Is this a threat to Labour, or is it actually helping Farage? You said you went to Palestine. Was it your first time?
It was, yeah. An entire people are, before our eyes, in the West Bank being driven from their land and in Gaza being exterminated with our support. And we can do something to stop that.
I'm Mehdi Hasan.
I'm Owen Jones.
And we are Two Outspoken. Owen, welcome back.
Well, I think welcome you back. You come back to Britain.
We're in London.
Yes,
we're in London.
We're here.
We are in the UK.
On home turf for me, certainly.
10 years after I moved. Yes, 10 years this year since I moved.
Tail between your legs, fled to foreign shores.
Fled. I may have to flee those foreign shores at the way those foreign shores are going.
I wouldn't joke about it. I actually think there's a very
we all
high...
need a plan B.
Yeah, I think with the general sort of fascism, it's not actually funny. I genuinely think there is a risk of that happening to you and a lot of other people.
They're very clear about how free speech doesn't matter anymore in the US. It doesn't matter what your citizenship status is. They want to be able to revoke passports, visas, for anyone who says something they don't like about Israel or Charlie Kirk or Donald Trump. It's scary.
It's interesting, isn't it? All that, hate speech is, facts don't care about your feelings, safe space. And now hate speech just means...
It was all projection.
Of course. It was all, they were all, we said this over and over again. They
never believed it.
It's a ruse, all the rest of it. And now we have the state openly talking about, criminalising, critiquing or opposing the state.
He wants to lock up on a conspiracy charge the Code Pink women who heckled him at a restaurant in DC.
Yeah, he sat there, didn't he, with the Attorney General behind him saying, can we look up how to make that happen? Heckling. Yeah, heckling. He said they're a paid agent.
Literally what American democracy and Western democracy is supposed to be built on, the ability to make fun of your leaders in public, protest them in public. Apparently now, it's not just a crime, it's a RICO crime, it's a conspiracy. He
said as well, not just her to an ABC journalist said, what is hate speech? And what does the Attorney General mean? And he said, I think people like you coming after me saying nasty things about me, you've already had to pay up all this.
He's the whiniest, thin-skinned little snowflake that we've ever had in our public life. It's insane how perpetually aggrieved he is.
And that is what the ideologues around him know, because he's not an ideologue. He's not there sitting around going through the intricacies of white nationalism and all the rest of it. He's instinctively, that's where he is. But those people around him know how to manipulate him. They know he's thin-skinned. They know they've got this big agenda. The thing is, I said this before, it was an obvious thing to say, but I said before he became president, those people were just looking for an incident or a crisis, maybe a terrorist attack, maybe some protests or riot or whatever, and they would use it to try and drive through attacks to shut down democracy. And that's what they've done with Charlie Kirk. It is a Reichstag fire moment. That's certainly how a lot of them see it. They see it as a means to criminalise the opposition. And they're talking about these big networks. They're talking about everything from George Soros, who's the traditional bogeyman of, for example, the Hungarian regime. They use that to shut democracy, to the left. And you kind of think like Zoran Mandani, hopefully, if he becomes mayor of New York, he's already said he'll take over New York. It's not. This isn't just.
They've talked about challenging his citizenship. This is their go-to move now for those of us who are naturalised American citizens like Mamdani and myself. You mentioned Hungary. Owen, we've talked about this before. This is a global phenomenon. I'm here in the UK just a few days after a far-right march through London. Over 100,000 people turned up for this march that was organised by Tommy Robinson, who I thought was still in prison, but I can never keep track of whether he's in prison, out of prison for whatever latest crime he's committed. I'm sitting in the US and I'm trying to tell Americans, this is really bad because the UK traditionally was insulated from the kind of far-right politics that you've seen on the continent. We've not had, a Le Pen do as well, as Le Pen has done in France and vice versa. That seems to be changing now in the UK. You've got more than 100,000 people on the street. Tommy Robinson now being mainstreamed by the Conservative Party. Elon Musk, the world's richest man, tunes in to incite some violence at the rally. What did you make of it all?
Well, the phenomenon you can see in Britain is exactly the same as the phenomenon happening across the Western world. And it is threefold, really. One, it's an economic system that, produces rising levels of insecurity, stagnating living standards, deteriorating public services. Two, either European Social Democratic or US Democrats failing to come up with answers to address those problems. And three, it's the old establishment Conservatives conjuring up a monster which then devours them.
Yes.
And what you see in the case of, you saw that in the US, right-wing Republicans conjured up, whipped up Islamophobia and all the rest of it, and they helped create the likes of Donald Trump. I mean, and here what you saw way back, David Cameron, Liberal Conservative, after the economic crash when the bankers plunged the economy into catastrophe and were bailed out, and then he went big on immigration being a massive problem. Immigration levels were high and they didn't come down as they were demonised, partly because if you can't actually reduce that without causing damage to the economy, but whatever. And then calls a referendum on membership of the EU, which just becomes all about immigration and becomes this demagogic nightmare.
And is that the fallout we're still seeing from that?
That is what you get. That's where right-wing populism of the Trumpian type is injected into British politics. Then Theresa May becomes leader of the Tories. She sort of conjures it up as well. She goes on about citizens. There were citizens of nowhere. This speech,
but we didn't see a rally like this.
No,
this is a very moment.
This is the biggest far right demonstration in British history. This is more than the black shirts of Oswald Mosley.
They will say it's not far right. It's patriots holding St George's crosses. How dare you?
It's patriots who demonising an entire minority, as they did in the 1930s and 1940s, this time Muslims, with the most vicious, vitriolic anti-Muslim hate speech imaginable.
But stopping off in between to grab a samosa and
classic.
some Indian and Middle Eastern food.
Enjoying the benefits of it, but and portraying the left as this, catch-all term of the left, as this enemy within, this subversive movement that's morally decadent and that is allied to aliens to destroy Western civilization. It's fascism all over again. It's the same tune they sung in the 1930s and 1940s. They just swapped this time Jews for Muslims, and they're now swapping, and they're also talking about the left in exactly the same way.
And they also honoured Charlie Kirk at this rally too, which is kind of bizarre because I would guesstimate that 98% of the British public had never heard of Charlie Kirk prior to his awful, horrific assassination last week. Is that, again, the Americanization of British politics and especially the British right?
Well, yeah, because one of the quite sinister things I heard being yelled at that rally was God is King, which is this term which is being used by the US far right. It's I'm not a religious person. I have huge amounts of respect for people who happen to be Christian, Muslim, Jewish, or whatever. But God is King is a catchphrase being used by this far right religious movement in the United States, and they were yelling it here. It's got nothing to do with British culture. People don't talk. That phrase has just been imported, and it's associated with the likes of Charlie Kirk and that. But
why was a nationalist rally about the UK addressed by a South African immigrant to the United States, Elon Musk?
Elon Musk.
Why did he beam in? What's he got to do with the UK?
Well, I mean,
other than lying about everything to do with the UK. He also keeps saying you need to have an election. He's the richest man in the world. He's about to be a trillionaire. Can he afford one guy just to sit down and explain to him how British politics works?
I think he's been generous there. What he's doing in practice is calling for a far-right coup. That's what he's trying to do. He's trying to use his power and muscle as the richest man on earth and someone who is a media mogul, who's got vast influence because he controls a massive social media platform, to try and overthrow a British government. I have no love. There's no love lost. But
they are legitimate elected government.
They are under our electoral system. They won that election. Now, I think what's disturbing though is what this is a really important part of the phenomenon. After World War II, when we sort of did all this, we did the Nazi and fascist thing, it didn't pan out very well, led to mass ruin and tens of millions of people being exterminated. There was an agreement, wasn't there, which was you had a cordon sanitaire, which is, this is as right-wing as legitimate. Do not pass that point. Beyond that point is not legitimate.
And even Margaret Thatcher signed up to that. When the National Front famously was on the rise in the early 80s, late 70s, the Conservative Party basically absorbed it.
Yeah,
Right?
exactly. And
They neutralised it.
They didn't go around...
But the modern Conservative Party is not doing that. Kemi Badenoch is saying that Tommy Robinson, she won't criticise or condemn Tommy Robinson.
Or Elon Musk.
She won't condemn...
And he's calling for violence on the streets. These are people who are, look, at the moment we've got pro-Palestinian activists being arrested for holding placards opposing genocide because they prescribed Palestine action, which did peaceful, non-violent action in opposing the genocide. They support locking those people up. But if you stand, they won't even condemn someone speaking in front of hundreds of thousands of people, calling for violence on the streets of this country. He's not even...
Just to remind everyone what you said, whether you choose violence or not, this is Elon Musk. He said the protesters face a genuine risk of rape and murder. We know from who. Whether you choose violence or not, violence is coming to you. You either fight back or you die.
It's not what I call...
That's not incitement.
It's not what I call ambiguous, is it?
What the hell is incitement?
It's not what I call ambiguous. So, and so what's happened to Tories now, and this is everywhere, the centre-right, what used to be known as the centre-right, have either been replaced by far-right movements in the continent, or they've just capitulated to them and they've just taken on there. And you can see that with the Tory leadership. They just now, they're talking very similar ways to Nigel Farage, who's got his own Reform UK party. Politically, what is actually the meaningful difference between them anymore? So they've all veered off to this extreme. And, the danger is you've got, this useless, awful, dire government, which can't address the problems, but is also accepting their policies and their rhetoric, and that's just legitimising them. It's shifting debate onto their turf. That's all it ever does. That's what it did in Europe.
I mean, transatlantically, the same thing is happening, where you have fascists on the rise and the centre-left unwilling to offer a populist, popular, charismatic, substantive resistance. Democracy is on life support, and the mainstream media is complicit. It's shutting down the kind of free debate and discussion we need right now. Big media outlets cover up and skew important stories, which is why I've been losing sleep to bring you unfiltered news here at Zeteo, but I can't be everywhere at once. Ground News is a platform that gathers thousands of stories and organises them for you with the context that matters. Ground News uses patented technology to bring you their blind spot feature, which surveys the media landscape to figure out which stories are receiving little to no coverage on either side of the political spectrum. Click on the blind spot tab and you'll find this story, for instance, about the latest ICE crackdowns. Compare the way it's being framed in each headline. You'll see which side of the spectrum is covering it and which is letting it fall through the cracks. You shouldn't have to spend all day sifting through the news to be informed. In one click, you'll see the stories beyond your bubble, so you know that you're getting the full picture. Don't miss out. Scan the QR code or go to ground.news/Zeteo, Zeteo, to subscribe. You'll get 40% off the unlimited access Vantage subscription. That's less than $5 a month. So what are you waiting for? You mentioned Palestine Action. This Labour government prescribed Palestine Action. The new Home Secretary is a Muslim who went to Palestine marches in the past, Shabana Mahmood. She's backing that prescription. At the Palestine march a week ago, 890 people were arrested. 890, an insane number of people. We saw the clips. A blind person in a wheelchair, a little old lady vicar. Like, you can't make this shit up. Like, central casting of people you would not arrest at a protest. At this past weekend's far-right protest, 24 people were arrested. Even though they actually assaulted police, they injured police, broken nose, skull injuries.
Police officers taken to hospital.
24 people arrested at a violent rally. 890 people arrested at a non-violent rally. How do we explain that disconnect?
The world turned on its head. In fact, this anti-terror legislation was introduced in 2000. And at the time, that was under Tony Blair. And at the time, every time a critic suggested that this would be used to attack civil liberties, they were accused of scaremongering. If you look at a graph per year since 2000 of the use of the Terrorism Act to arrest people, you suddenly see this massive spike. And if someone back then was going to look at that spike and go, oh, wow, what happened there? Must be some terrorist insurgency going on. Oh, no, it's some people holding placards opposing genocide. Ridiculous. So what it is ridiculous. It's obviously obscene. And, but this is the problem.
But I don't live here anymore. So I would ask you anecdotally, forget the polls. I've got some polling I'll come to. Do people here think it's ridiculous?
Well, most people don't know very much about Palestine Action, but the polling shows...
But they must see images of, little old ladies being
I don't know
arrested.
what the latest poll... There was only one poll done before all of that, and it did show at least 30% opposed to the prescription. But most people don't know about it other than being told in the media there's this big, scary, extremist terrorist organisation, because it's now illegal to mount a defence of Palestine action, because if you mount a defence of Palestine action, then you break the law. If I said I support Palestine action right now, then I'm liable to be arrested with a prison sentence of up to 14 years.
Insanity.
That is insanity. But
and yet Elon Musk, by the way, to go back to Musk, who's obsessed with the UK, been going on about the end of the free speech, the fall of the UK, has nothing to say about this. I haven't heard him say a word about this piece of legislation, which is the most anti-speech legislation we have right now in the UK.
I mean, it's the same, in the United States, J.D. Vance, he goes off to do this big speech about free speech in Munich, and now you get the biggest crackdown on free speech in the history of America.
If you see someone celebrating Charlie Kirk, call his employer.
But the reason it's really dangerous in that to link together what we saw this weekend is, I can see this country descending into fascism. I honestly can, in a way that I couldn't before.
Do you see Nigel Farage? We've talked about this before. You said you could see him being the next Prime Minister, despite having, 5 seats in Parliament. I think he's got a defector from the Conservative Party now, Danny Kruger. Do you still see that? Do you see it more likely than the last time we spoke?
Under our electoral system, he could win a majority, hypothetically, on 27% of the vote. That's how the electoral system works. He could win a lower than that, by the way.
Is the mere existence of Keir Starmer, who 69% of Brits disapprove of, that's, right at the beginning of his premiership, we're not that far into his prime ministership. He's just lost his deputy prime minister. His director of strategy resigned over explicitly racist comments about Diane Abbott,
which they already knew about. They didn't take any action.
They also knew about Peter Mandelson and Jeffrey Epstein. Made him ambassador to the US. He's now been fired after the emails came out showing how close him and Epstein were. Is Keir Starmer helping Farage simply by his existence?
He's the midwife of a Farage government, because people were desperate to get rid of the Conservatives. The Conservatives presided over the worst government in British democratic history. Living standards, the worst squeeze in our modern history. NHS on its knees, the country just falling apart, constant scandal, constant turmoil. People wanted something different. Then they got a government which decided to kick pensioners by taking away winter fuel payments, which was something to help them heat their homes. Wanted to drive huge numbers of disabled people into poverty, which then blew up in their faces. Which doesn't have a vision for the country to how to fix the problems that we have. They've got this ideological straitjacket in terms of what they can do with the economy, and that means they won't increase taxes on the rich, for example. And as a result, they're desperately unpopular. They don't have a vision. All they had, the people who run the Labour Party, is a hatred of the left. And Morgan McSweeney, who's the Chief of Staff and the real Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, useless waste of space. His own advisors briefed 2 journalists early this year for their book that he thought he was driving the train, but they'd actually put him in front of a driverless district light railway train. Morgan McSweeney is this guy who just hates the left. He's in charge of the country, and he doesn't have a vision.
But the left feel that hatred. They are defecting in big numbers. I think I saw a poll, 26% of Starmer's 2024 electoral coalition is now defecting to the Lib Dems, to the Greens, to the nationalist parties in Scotland and Wales. Is this the end of the Labour Party as we know it, or the two-party system? The Conservatives are draining people to reform. Is the Labour Party losing a lot of people to these new left parties? We've got what's it called?
It's not got a name yet. They're going to have a vote of their members.
What's it called right now? Your party?
Yeah, it's a holding name. I think they should call themselves the People's Party.
All right.
Seems like
Your Party, with Jeremy Corbyn, former Labour leader, Zara Sultana, former Labour MP, they've launched this party. The Greens have just elected a very lefty, charismatic leader, Zach Polansky. Is this a threat to Labour, or is it actually helping Farage?
Well, I mean, that's going to be the Labour line, isn't it?
Isn't it true, mathematically?
No, because I think what people need to realise is a lot of people, I remember this back in the last election, people who were told, if you vote Reform, who were Tories or whatever, then you'll end up with a Labour government. And they were like, we're never going to vote for the Tories. You don't seem to understand this. There's been, amongst huge numbers of people who voted for the Labour Party, who did before, they have crossed the Rubicon, as far as they're concerned, and they will never vote for them ever again. So they'll either sit at home or not vote. Now, what will happen...
Okay, but whether they sit at home and not vote, or vote for Greens or your party, that still helps Farage.
Well,
are we disputing that? I don't know. I'm just looking at the math. If Reform is going to benefit from Labour defectors,
I'll tell you why. Because the key battlegrounds that the new Left Party will be fighting in are in the main urban centres: Greater London, Greater Manchester, Merseyside, and so on, where Reform are just not in contention.
No, but Reform are not in contention. but you'll be defeating Labour MPs.
Yeah,
and therefore making it easier for reform to form a majority.
Let me give you an example. Islington South, where I live now. Yeah. Islington South, Labour won that election. The Greens came second, and the Brexit part, Reform UK, Nigel Farage has won anywhere.
Yeah.
That's a battleground between Labour and
Isn't that the whole
Greens
point? But aren't you making the point of the critics then?
No.
Because if they're just displacing Labour MPs, then mathematically they're reducing Labour's majority in Parliament, making it easier for another party to form a majority.
I think the reason we're cross purposes in terms of what the outcome, in my view, needs to be, which is a hung Parliament.
Very hard to aim for a hung Parliament, though.
Well, I mean, look, the reality is Labour are going to lose all these seats at the moment because people don't like them.
So the argument you're making, which is a good one, is if it's going to be a hung Parliament, you increase the number of actual left parties vying for a coalition.
Absolutely, which can then, for one, what needs to happen is change the electoral system. Because at the moment, Reform, because under our electoral system, you're right, there is the danger Reform win a majority, an absolute majority on a low vote. But, you know, it's Labour's responsibility if they lose their voters. They're the ones losing those votes. Well, they are.
That was the argument last year in the United States. And it's true. It is the Democrats' fault that they lost voters. But we still all ended up with Trump. Yeah. Doesn't make me feel any better. Yeah,
true. But if the Greens... And if the Green, if
you supported the Greens at the last election,
right? I voted for the Green Party. Yeah.
Do you think that in seats where it's a Reform Labour straight split, should Greens and I know we're very early days, but I'm just thinking theoretically, as we think about these new parties, would that be a place where you think the Greens and your party shouldn't get involved?
Well, you know, I think people just have to assess what the political background is at the time. And I think the problem is actually at the moment is...
Shouldn't the goal be to stop Reform?
Well, no, because the worry I have there is there are lots of... If you look at the polling of Reform voters at the moment, on some questions they're more left-wing than Labour voters. And actually, if the left gets itself together...
So you think they could win
They could get a vote. And look, I remember in 2017, so in 2015, Labour lost the election badly under Ed Miliband. In 2017, they under Jeremy Corbyn.
Came very close.
And they said, oh yeah, well look, how are Labour going to get more votes when, you know, Ed Miliband was too left-wing and now Jeremy Corbyn's more left-wing. And they went from 30% to 40%. And some of those votes did go from people who voted for Nigel Farage's party in 2015. People out there don't actually think in terms of left and right. They often just think in terms of issues to be addressed.
Yeah.
And I think actually the danger with the left not getting their act together is a lot of people who are fed up with the system and the way society is running and they don't like Keir Starmer will by default go to Reform, go to Nigel Farage. And I think if the left get their act together, then some of that can be won over to an alternative, which says, well, actually, we need to tax rich people to invest in the economy and life's not going to be made any better by punching an immigrant in the face repeatedly.
Are you a fan of the Corbyn Sultana party?
Well, I mean, it's do you know what? I'm like so pragmatic about this. I'm like, you know, I don't want to know how the sausages are made, even though I'm aware as a political journalist, I am sort of obliged to know how the sausages are made. I want them to get their act together and then form an alliance with the Greens and then just do something good and compelling, which attracts people. I mean, they are dragging it out at the moment, and there's various internal wrangling. Partly for my mental health.
Internal wrangling on the left.
I know.
I've never come across that before.
For my own mental health, I'm partly like, do I really need to
in my entire life, I've never come across internal wrangling on the left.
But that's what I think they need to, because there's still a long time the election. That's it's 4 years in theory. I think if the left gets their acts together, they can draw some of the anger that Farage is capitalising on. Because look, he's just attracting another Tory. He's a right-wing Tory.
I mean, a lot of this feels very familiar to me. People are saying, look at the way that Bernie Sanders has managed to capitalise on anger that Democrats haven't. That's the root, right? There's a populist part that blames not migrants, Mexicans, Muslims, and transgender kids, but blames the 1%, the 0.1%, big corporations. Mamdani's showing there's a route to doing that in a place like New York. You mentioned people in Britain crossing the Rubicon, i.e. they will never vote for Labour again no matter what, especially under Starmer. That is partly or primarily because of Gaza. A lot of people are upset about the British government's role in this genocide. They've been locking up pensioners and people in wheelchairs.
Because you think, oh no, if we get this big authoritarian right-wing government and you've already got a government under Labour which is locking up pensioners for opposing genocide, it gets a little bit hard.
No, same thing happened last year. It was like, oh, it's going to get worse. And it did get worse, but it was very hard to make that case when it was so bad last year as well. On the Gaza note, do you think the Labour government now saying all this, oh, Israel's doing bad stuff, oh, we're against the invasion of Gaza City, oh, annexation's bad, oh, we're going to support a two-state solution, What is that? Is that too little, too late? Is that realising that they're on the wrong side of history?
They're still. Last week, the British government declared officially a letter signed by David Lammy that it was their view that Israel is not committing genocide in Gaza. That's in defiance of the consensus of genocide scholars.
This week, the UN International Commission said it is genocide.
They're still providing crucial components for F-35 jets. They're still doing intelligence sharing.
So it's just a rhetorical shift.
Yeah, well, exactly. Look, I mean, again, they're still training Israeli soldiers on British soil.
They just hosted President Herzog.
Exactly. They just rolled out the red carpet for him, and also. They're not even, they're allowing British nationals to serve in the IDF and commit all sorts of war crimes. I mean, we could go on. There's £6 billion worth of trade between Britain and Israel. They can impose sweeping sanctions. When I just come back from Palestine, and what was really driven home to me by Palestinians on the issue of recognising a Palestinian state, they said about 30 years too late. They said that's something the British should have done in the 1990s,
yes.
Not when Palestine's literally been wiped from the face of the earth. So and they said they're not doing that for us. They're doing that for domestic political purposes. They're doing that for you guys. So you stop complaining. And they say we're actually doing something when they're not doing something substantial.
I remember the 2001 Labour Party conference. I was there sitting in the crowd. It was after 9/11. We had gone in. UK had joined the war in Afghanistan, if I remember correctly, by then in October. Tony Blair gave a big speech about the kaleidoscope had been shaken. People were cheering, and he said, I think he name-checked Gaza, if my memory serves me correctly, about how we were going to, this was going to be the moment. We're going to use this moment to get peace in the Middle East. And that was obviously complete and utter bullshit from Blair. You said you went to Palestine. Was it your first time?
It was, yeah. It was difficult. I wasn't sure I was going to get it. I went with a delegation, a brilliant Palestinian Christian organisation called Sabeel. It was different. Yeah,
You didn't go through Israel?
No, went via Jordan we ended up in Jerusalem. It was. They revoked my ETA 2 days after I stayed in the country.
Surprised they gave it to you in the first place.
Yeah, I was a bit surprised. They were. I don't know what was going on there. Even I think it's interesting because even if you obviously, I spend every day talking to Palestinians and reading what's going on and obviously videos and all the rest of it. Obviously watching what's happening up front is a shocking experience. When you see apartheid up close, when I was in Hebron and, the roads which Palestinians are barred from going on, where Palestinians are welded into their homes and businesses, where Hebron's equivalent of Oxford Street has been shut down by the Israeli military to protect 300 or 400 illegal Israeli settlers, and people are caged in their own homes as Israeli settlers are building all over their land. It's just what I find disturbing and just is a vice is being every day is tighter around the people's necks in the West Bank, and it's clear the long-term aim is just to get rid of the Palestinians between the river and the sea. It's just so obvious because there's not a tolerable situation for Palestinians to basically be confined to major urban areas, Bethlehem, Ramallah and all the rest of it. I met a Palestinian friend, he's just outside Jerusalem, and we went to Ramallah and all the rest of it. He's been to Jerusalem once in his life when he was a little kid. I'm just wandering around Jerusalem. And he's just on the outskirts. Yeah. And, he's in his late 20s.
We're in London right now. If you walked out of the studio onto the street and bumped into a random white British citizen who doesn't follow foreign affairs, what would you want him to know about Palestine based on what you just went out and saw?
That there are people who are being driven from the land they've lived in for centuries and centuries, who are being murdered. Imagine your land, which you've been living on for generations, and a settler comes over and steals it, and then the army comes to back them up, and that if you get settlers attacking you, and you can't ring the police because the police are on the side of the people stealing your land, and that that our government's arming and supporting that they have third class, fourth, fifth class rights. That this is apartheid South Africa, but worse. Because apartheid South Africa didn't commit genocide against these people. I would say that our people are facing, an entire people are before our eyes in the West Bank being driven from their land and in Gaza being exterminated with our support. And, we can do something to stop that. I know Britain pulling the plug on its own won't stop it. But, if Spain's already, its government's taking a stand.
The Spanish are taking a very strong stance saying Israel shouldn't be in Eurovision. Well, the Spanish.
Those islands, Slovenia, other countries are taking a stand, and I would also say this isn't making any of us safer here, because people are seeing that the West says one thing and does another, that, you know, it's all human rights, democracy, international law. The West is just lying through its teeth to the world. Everyone can see that. That will mean the world will collapse ever further into anarchy, and people are getting radicalised to hate this country because we're arming a genocide. I mean, what do people expect?
The argument's been made for a while. You and I have obviously used the G word earlier on, as did groups like Amnesty and Human Rights Watch. The UN have now come around in this International Commission report. B'Tselem, the Israeli human rights group, has said the same thing. Others are coming around, academics, maybe a little too late, but they're coming around. How enduring do you think the change in opinion is? Because the cynic in me looks at, for example, 52% of Americans have a negative view of Israel. First time ever a majority of Americans. But I feel like that could all change on a dime. I feel like people are fickle. I feel like, God forbid, there was another major terror attack in Israel. People would immediately switch their sympathies back because that's a country they know. I just wonder how much, there's also a fatigue with Gaza. People, you know, media-wise, social media-wise, people just, it's 2 years. We're coming up to the second anniversary of October the 7th and the genocide that began after the horrific attacks on October 7th. I'm just wondering, you're always more optimistic and hopeful than me. How enduring do you think the change of attitudes is at a governmental level, at a public opinion level?
Well, I look, direction of travel for a start. I mean, look, 50% of Americans think genocide has been committed, yes. 35% think not. And if you'd said, like 3 years ago, we'll end up in that situation, you'd think, what the hell? You know, it was a murder. You can speak about genocide, you can speak about critically about Israel in the United States, full stop. I think too many people have seen, heard and read things which can't be unseen and unheard and unread. And, you know, there's the Iraq. I know people come up with Iraq and what lasting consequences. Well, I think there were profound lasting political consequences, actually, from Iraq. And not always good, because I think Donald Trump wouldn't be president without the Afghan and Iraq catastrophes. I think lots of things led to what happened there. Agree. But I think, you know, that was a crime in its own right. I went to Iraq the other week. I've been on quite the tour. And I met the visceral anger of, you know, people there, given what... But I think what this is a genocide where you watch the genocidal extermination of children. Yeah. I just think, you know, where every possible crime is live streamed, where the people perpetrating the crime basically brag and confess about it. It's not like Iraq, we're like, oh no, we're liberating the people there. Yeah. And most of those were killed by the sectarian strife, which we were crucial in unleashing. So it's not like I'm not divorcing us from that. Yeah. But when you see an army armed by the West, just committing the most obviously monstrous crimes every TikTok. Single day, I think that has changed people. And I honestly think...
And you still think there'll be a reckoning?
I honestly think there's no question there'll be a reckoning.
Because you mentioned Iraq. The reason why I'm so cynical compared to you, and I hope you're right and I'm wrong, is that we didn't get a reckoning for Iraq, right? Tony Blair is busy advising, apparently, allegedly, Donald Trump on how to get rid of the people of Gaza via consulting group.
Did you get the International Criminal Court issuing arrest warrants during the Iraq War? No, you did not. Did you get an International Court of Justice case against Britain and the United States during the Iraq War? No, you didn't. Did you have...
But all the Iraq War criminals are still walking free.
I agree, and this time we can't let them get away with it. But this crime is much worse. Yes. And it's much more documented and confessed to. I mean, just as an example, the US and Britain did commit lots of crimes in Iraq, which were, I'm afraid, hidden from view, which people don't know about. That's not the same here because of, you know, that's why they keep trying to murder all the journalists. But it's because of social media, new technology, phones, all the rest of it.
The Haditha massacre wasn't done on cell phone selfie cameras. Yeah.
Exactly. I just think this is of an order that's different. The other point is the West is much weaker. Its power in the world is much weaker than it was. So it's more vulnerable. That's why the global South is you know, kind
South Africa led that case,
and they wouldn't have done that a while ago because they wouldn't have had.
They've been threatened.
No, exactly. And the idea the International Criminal Court would stand up to Britain. You know, he said, Karen Khan, the chief prosecutor, he was told by a global leader that this court was built for African thugs in Russia. You know, this wasn't supposed to turn on the West. I just think things have shifted. Look, it might... I do keep saying when I say there's a reckoning, it might take 2 years, it might take 5 years, it might take 10 years, it might take 20 years. There's no statute of limitation on genocide, but I think this crime is way too big. And look, just quickly, could you imagine AOC becoming president? I wouldn't rule it out one day. Would you rule that out? I wouldn't rule it out.
I wouldn't rule out anything.
No, exactly, because things are so febrile. Yes. But I'm just... That is a really important point, because you could imagine a change of government in the United States where they say that this terrible crime was committed and we need to have a reckoning.
Well, it's what Barack Obama should have done when he won. He came in and said, we tortured some folks, time to look forward, not back.
Exactly.
And didn't prosecute anyone from the Bush administration.
He said it was a dumb war.
Although I do love this episode of Two Outspoken where we're imagining a future Anglo-American summit of Prime Minister Farage meeting President Ocasio-Cortez. Now that would be a summit worth being a fly on the wall for.
So maybe she can impose some sanctions on us. No, joking. That's
unpatriotic Owen Jones.
Yeah.
I do like to end on a note of hope. I'm glad that you still think we're going to get a reckoning. I hope you're right.
You don't think? You really just don't think so at all?
No, I don't do predictions anymore. I refuse to predict anything. I said that Brexit wouldn't happen and Trump wouldn't win in 2016. So after that, I said, let's leave the prediction game. Anything is possible in this world.
I think we might end up with fascism for quite a long time.
Yeah, that I have predicted. That's not really more a prediction. That's more just an observation. No, it's happening in plain sight.
I think we're going to go through a really grim authoritarian fascist phase.
Stop. We were ending on a hopeful note.
I think we'll get out of it.
We'll get out of it.
It'll be bad, and then it'll be after a really grim period of struggle.
But we will get out of it.
Yeah,
I'm Mehdi Hasan.
I'm Owen Jones.
And we're Two Outspoken.
See you next time.
Did you like this video? Don't forget to subscribe to this YouTube channel and turn on notifications. For exclusive content and to support our independent, unfiltered journalism, head over to zeteo.com. Your support matters.